This is No Talking in the Library, Mentor Public Library's media podcast where we talk about movies, TV, comic books, pretty much anything we find interesting.
Hi, I'm John.
And I'm Meredith.
And this is No Talking in the Library, coming to you from a secret black site located somewhere under the streets of London. Obviously, once again, we can't really tell you where, because we'd probably end up like in front of some congressional committee, and neither of us wants that, right? So today we're going to talk about the movie Haywire. This is a movie that, number one, will always stay with me because you gave me the Blu-ray of it, which was the first Blu-ray that I ever owned after I serendipitously discovered that Blu-ray players will actually play your DVDs too, which is, it's kind of funny that it took me that long to figure it out. But it's a movie that I then watched and really loved, so we thought that it would be a good movie for us to talk about today.
Sure, it's a snappy little film. It's from 2011, directed by Steven Soderbergh. And I saw this movie in theaters. I remember I was living in Bloomington. I remember the trailers coming out. They actually advertised it by releasing the first 5 minutes, and the first 5 minutes is this sort of really exciting fight scene. But before we get into that, it'll make more sense when we sort of describe the setup of this movie. So it is a spy film at its heart. It's sort of a Jason Bourne type of 60s throwback to that genre. And the main character is a woman named Mallory Kane, and she's an ex-Marine, and she currently works for a private black ops company that gets hired out to do various tasks.
The kinds of things that black ops companies do.
Right. In the movie, we see them rescuing a hostage from some
unnamed group of terrorists or bad people.
And what happens in this movie is that the main character, Mallory, is double-crossed by her boss and set up for murder. And so Mallory then has to sort of unravel the double-crossing and the backstabbing to get revenge on the people who have wronged her. And the twist of this movie has got an incredible cast. You've got Channing Tatum, you've got Ewan McGregor, you've got Michael Fassbender, you've got Antonio Banderas, you've got Michael Douglas. But the twist of this film is that the main character, Mallory Kane, is actually played by an MMA star named Gina Carano.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting twist. It helps, I will just say, that she doesn't have a huge amount of lines. And I mean, part of the sort of draw of Gina Carano is that she really does the sort of physical part of it very well. She does the fight scene parts of it very well and instinctively, in the way that a person who's actually been in a fair number of sort of throwdown brawls knows exactly how it's going to go down, what kinds of things you would do and what kinds of things that you wouldn't do.
Yeah, so this movie is basically like multiple set pieces of Gina Carano fighting her way through the cast.
Right.
So it's a scene where she's beating up Channing Tatum, and that's the scene that they use to tease the movie. Then there's a scene of her beating up Michael Fassbender in a hotel. It's like where, like, how many different places can Gina Carano beat up her castmates? And it's like Gina Carano fights someone in a diner. Gina Carano fights someone in a hotel room. Gina Carano fights someone on a beach.
Right, and it's like what's lying around that you might use to disable somebody or to kill them. Another interesting thing about it is that it's told in this kind of pastiche technique where she starts out in a diner with Channing Tatum, beats him down pretty severely, ends up getting in a car with some random guy, and then the sort of mode of telling of the story is her, or a lot of it, is her telling the story to this guy who's helping her escape that she just met in the diner or whatever. And I think that's a kind of, once again, it facilitates that thing that you were talking about of sort of like set piece battles, if you will, or set piece violence, which is something that really plays to Gina Carano's strengths. Interestingly enough, I read this in sort of doing some background for this. When she first started fighting MMA, people kind of didn't take her seriously because they thought she was too pretty, which, whatever, that's a subjective thing that we can't like put a number on. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, it's not like she doesn't look like a model. I mean, she's just looks like a normal person, which I guess if you're fighting MMA and don't have like your nose skewed off to the side or whatever, like that's I guess they have a different standard or whatever in the whole world of MMA.
Yeah, so this movie it's really fun. It's a very slick movie. It's not too long. It doesn't get bogged down in a lot of narrative because Steven Soderbergh doesn't put too much of the narrative weight on Gina Carano's shoulders, which is really smart because she's been cast in a couple of other movies, and anytime you put any more like acting requirements on her, it's too much. Steven Soderbergh really knew what he was doing when he decided to build this movie around her, and that's sort of like the story that got told around the time it was coming out. He was channel surfing around 2008 and caught a fight of hers on television.
Right.
And was like, oh man, someone should make a movie around her. And he was really smart in doing what he did. And a lot of the movie is actually silent, like montages. Like there's just no dialogue whatsoever. There's just this really sort of awesome score that plays. And it's what you need to do if you're going to have someone like that as your star.
Right. She's kind of rough as an actor, and here might be a moment to sort of get more deeply into the other film that you were sort of referencing in a backhanded way just now, In the Blood, a movie in which Gina Carano plays a woman who was taught to be a sort of...
It's like reverse Taken or something, right?
Right. It's like a sort of Taken with a female. Her father taught her to be a sort of... all these sort of fighting techniques, and then she got into some sort of bad way after he got killed, and she gets married with this guy who's also, they met in NA or something like that. So they go on vacation, or they go on their honeymoon to some Caribbean island, Spanish-speaking Caribbean island.
And he gets taken by drug lords or something.
Right, yeah, it turns out that, well... I don't even... Okay, spoiler alert. He gets taken by some drug lord who needs his spinal fluid. I won't tell you any more than that.
I think you already have talked more about the plot than any normal person should.
Right. I mean, but the fact of the matter is, the substance of her acting in that movie is a repetition of the lines, "Where's my husband?" or "Who took my husband?" I mean, she says it, over and over, and it's basically all... It's all she says, and moreover, the acting in it is... overall, so I mean, it has a bunch of straight to video.
No, I saw In the Blood in theaters.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
okay. Yeah, it did come out in theaters. All I'm saying is
yeah.
Treat Williams and Danny Trejo and
it's basically like a straight to DVD C-list movie.
Right. But I will say this about it: it does have some really incredible fight scenes, and once again, a lot of it is the way that Gina Carano carries herself in a fight. She just looks like someone who's been there before. She's not one of these actors who has to sort of ham it up. It's just her body position, her body movement is exactly right for somebody who's actually been in a "I'm going to punch you" sort of situation.
The fighting in Haywire is it's just so much fun to watch because it's so physical and heavy looking. The punches are a lot of body blows. It's not fancy.
Right.
Fight choreography. It just looks brutal. Fassbender picks her up and smashes her into walls at various points, and it's just a lot of
It's not people punching each other in the face constantly and then just sort of
right
standing up, and that's if somebody full on hits you with a right cross to the jaw, chances are you're really going to notice that. It's probably going to loosen up some teeth unless they're a small child or whatever. So the idea that the thing I really loved about Haywire was the fight scenes were so much more realistic than they are in a lot of this other movies in this genre.
So one of the fun things about Haywire's action sequences is that it's not just her fighting her co-stars. She's doing also a lot of like running and climbing, and she's so like a physical person that it's fun to watch her like move around these cityscapes.
Right, and it's plausible too. I mean, one thing, when you look at Gina Carano, she's built like someone who could do this. I mean, so one of the things like I was noticing when I was watching episodes of the 1970s Wonder Woman for the last episode that we did, Linda Carter doesn't really have the physique of somebody who like has done a lot of physical training. And, you know, she was a model, so it's not surprising. But and of course, she's an Amazon, so it doesn't really matter what she looks like. In a certain sense, she's got sort of supernatural strength. Although, when you watch the Wonder Woman movie, what you see the Amazons spend all their time doing is physical combat type training. But Gina Carano, you look at her, and she just looks right for the part, and she looks right doing it. And that's something that also, you know, she's wearing the right shoes.
Okay, so I was going to say that. Thank you for bringing it up. This movie I've seen used as an example of the right way of having like doing fight scenes with women. So let's pick a bad example. It's not even a fight scene, but the worst offender of having a woman in your movie, in your action movie, is Jurassic World.
Right.
The movie in which Bryce Dallas Howard spends the entire movie and outruns a Tyrannosaurus Rex wearing a pair of nude heels. The whole time. She's walking through the swamp, she's walking through the jungle, she's wearing a pair of heels. Never at any point does she take off her shoes or look for boots or something. Like, it's just a glaring example of like a male director who doesn't get it.
Right. We were talking the other day in the office, and I was mentioning, you know, the question of what does Sharon Stone have going for her as Catwoman. One of the things is that she doesn't actually eat cat food, unlike the other horrible Catwoman. But one of the almost unwatchable things about that character is she's in like 3-inch heels, and there's just absolutely no way that you can do the kinds of things that she's supposed to be doing, and no sane person would think of doing them wearing that kind of footwear.
But in Haywire, there is a scene where Gina Carano and Michael Fassbender are undercover at this fancy party, so they're wearing black tie clothes, and she's wearing a dress and heels, and they're making their way back to the room, and she can tell something's about to go down, and the first thing she does is take her shoes off. And it's like they don't draw attention to it. Soderbergh just sort of points the camera so that you can see, the audience can see her doing it, but Michael Fassbender is opening the door so he doesn't see it, and then the fight just breaks out.
Right. And that's, you know, it's a little detail, but it's really important, and it really reflects an actual process of thinking through what is it going to be like to be in a fight. I mean, just to sort of mention something on a similar sort of thing, in that opening fight scene in The Avengers, when Black Widow, played by Scarlett Johansson, is getting interrogated by the Russian guys, and she gets the phone call, and then beats them down in a really great fight scene. What is the final thing that you see as she walks out of the room? She picks up her shoes, right? Because she couldn't be doing flips in a chair and doing, you know, fighting techniques while she's wearing high heel shoes. Like, nobody can do that.
This is a movie with the main character is a woman, but I wouldn't necessarily call it like a feminist film. What are your sort of thoughts on that?
Well, I have some thoughts, but
okay.
But one of the things I want to sort of ask before I get into it is, what exactly do you mean? What is a feminist film? I mean, granted, that's like a big topic, but just put briefly, what question am I answering here?
Well, the idea, I guess, is that it's not necessarily a film concerned with her being a woman. She just is a woman, and that does that make sense? I guess
it does make sense, and I think that that's really right. It doesn't center on aspects of her being female. And if you read the reviews of this movie, a number of them said, like a lot of the Rotten Tomatoes reviews basically riffed on the theme, this is essentially just a kind of Bourne movie with a female lead character rather than a male lead character. And I think that's, in a lot of ways, that's true. It just doesn't make a point of, so it's not like you have people sort of challenging her femininity or challenging her. It's the kind of thing that could just as easily have happened to a man.
And I don't think that's necessarily a demerit against the movie. I think it's awesome that they cast a female MMA fighter in this role. It's just a different... It's one of those things, like, yeah, we should have all different kinds of movies with women in them. We should have movies that are stories made by women telling female stories, and you should have movies where women are just beating up dudes, like, without, having necessarily for it to have a lot of sort of feminist,
right,
like, weight on it.
I mean, it could have had a sort of feminist content in the sense that if they could have made this narrative choice, the guys are always sort of, like, underestimating her, and she sort of shows that she's not to be underestimated. But that's not the case. Everybody knows that she's a player, and everybody knows that they have to take her seriously. So there's no underestimating of her. Yeah,
I really like that there's never a point where she has to prove herself. The movie just starts, and her boss, who's played by Ewan McGregor, is making some deal, and I think it's Michael Douglas who's like, no, I want Mallory. Like, she's the reason why I've come to your company. If we don't have her, I don't want to make this deal. Like, there's never at any point where she has to sort of prove her value, and I like that a lot.
Right. It's basically it's feminist in the sense that it doesn't feel like it has to be, or it doesn't have to. I mean, we're in a situation now in the world where, because women are sort of treated in a certain way or viewed in certain ways, a lot of films have to kind of make the point, and that's okay. But this is another thing, and this is, I think, a great thing too, where we're not even going to address the fact that it might be, we're not going to make that a plot point. What we're going to do is assume that everybody knows that she could straight up kill you, and we're going to go from there. And it's not going to be, she could kill you just as easily as Channing Tatum could kill you, or just as easily as Ewan McGregor could kill you, etc.
My one criticism would be, I wish that one of the other characters was a woman. Like, why not cast Helen Mirren instead of Michael Douglas? So if I could change one thing about the movie, it would be that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Like, it really, I mean, on the one hand, probably that's, I guess, in a certain sense, an accurate reflection of who would be doing this kind of thing. I mean, I guess we're not really that concerned about accurate reflection, since this is a spy flick, and there's a lot of
I feel like any of the head bosses could have maybe been
right. I mean, okay, so I will say that sometimes the sort of insertion of a woman in that position, people then say, well, of course, like there's some sort of something perfidious about women such that they're double crossers or whatever. So, but overall, I mean, it was really, another thing about it too is that you made this point. It's not like a super long movie, so that it's something that you can sort of sit down and enjoy, and you don't have to like think really deeply about it, which is what you want a lot of times in these movies.
Yeah, it's actually better if you don't think too hard about the plot of Haywire, because as awesome as the movie is, the plot is like very creaky, I think is the best way to describe it. I was watching it with my parents, and I've seen this movie I don't even know how many times, so I know where the story's going, and we were probably a half an hour in, and my mom was just like not into it because she didn't know what was going on, because you really don't find out what is happening until an info dump in like the last 5 minutes of the movie.
Right. You kind of have to watch it at a sort of superficial level, which is fine. Once again, I mean, that's in a way, this makes it kind of different than the Bourne movies, where there's so much backstory that he's like digging into, and at a certain point.
Isn't one of those movies taking place simultaneously as like the second one?
Right,
oh,
yeah.
God.
And at a certain point, I'm just like, God,
how do you watch that?
Should I have been taking notes here? Like, is there going to be an exam at the end of this, such that?
But you don't have that with Haywire. You can I put it on and have it on in the background and just sort of perk up when Gina Carano's, strangling Michael Fassbender to death with her thigh.
Right, and who wouldn't want to watch that? Yeah. So you pointed out this line, and I think this is really interesting. Toward the end of the movie, Mallory's boss is sort of planning her murder, and when one of the other characters mentions that he's never killed a woman before, Kenneth says, "You shouldn't think of her as a woman. That would be a mistake." And why was that a line that you found striking?
Well, there's very little dialogue in this movie.
That's true.
So to sort of have a line said like that sticks out. And I pointed it out because I both like it and hate it. I like it for the reasons for what we've talked about. I like that this is a movie where she's considered an equal. I like that the fact that she's a woman is irrelevant to anything. And I like the fact that, she doesn't have to do any sort of proving of her talents. But at the same time, I kind of hate that, she is a woman. It does matter.
Right. I mean, it matters in a slightly different sense. I guess I would have liked not to sort of hear that line, just in the sense that of what we were talking about earlier, that it's just never brought up. The difference is never brought up. And so it puts her on this kind of equal footing with all these other guys. The reason that they're trying to jam her is not because she's female. The reason they're trying to jam her is because
money.
Right, they have some other plan. But it could have just as easily happened to any one of the other people.
It kind of reads to me, if I'm reading it in a way that rubs me the wrong way, I hear it in my mind as well, women can't do these things, so don't think of her as a woman.
Right.
But she is a woman. She has these talents with her lady biology and whatever.
Yeah, it kind of backtracks on something that in other respects is a real strength of the movie, that they don't bother with that storyline about the woman has to overcome the added barrier of her femaleness in order to be accounted a real spy or a real dangerous person or whatever. So, it's funny because there's no setup for that line at all.
Yeah.
It just sort of comes out, and you're just
it could have just as easily been yeah, she's a woman and she's going to kick your ass.
Right, yeah. Yeah, there was sort of no point. If you're not going to talk about it, if you're not going to make it an issue in the rest of the movie, you might as well just not make it an issue.
You don't point a spotlight at it.
Right.
But it's such a minor thing that
right.
It doesn't even affect the rest of the awesomeness of the movie.
Right. I suppose the kind of last thing to talk about here is just that this is a movie in a genre that's pretty crowded, but one that oddly enough, atypically enough, kind of stands out in the sense that, you wouldn't look at this and be like, wow, there are all these movies where they try and sort of insert someone from a different milieu into movies to try and draw on some skills that they have. And this is clearly one of those cases where, they've taken Gina Carano, who clearly, once again, knows how to fight, put her around all these sort of big stars. And it really, benefits too. The quality of acting in The Blood is so bad that sometimes it looks like real life. It almost, you can kind of imagine those people saying those lines. The one guy who plays the dude who gets them into all the problems, he's such a bad actor but it's really entertaining. Let me just, in case there are those of you who listen to this and think to yourself, my God, I never want to watch In the Blood, I really recommend it. It's really an entertaining movie. But this is a really good movie, I think. Actually, it doesn't get the sort of critical play that I think it deserves.
Yeah, I think this is a really underrated film, and I'm really surprised that more people haven't seen it, because it's just an easy movie to watch.
Yeah, and it's really entertaining. It's not taxing. It's exactly what you want out of a spy thriller. It's not, it's not have you ever seen the remake of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy? that is one of the most excruciating movies I've ever seen, because literally, I mean, the book on which it's based has a fairly complicated plot, but that movie is so complicated that I'd seen the original series and I've read the book more than once, and I still couldn't figure out what was going on in a lot of that movie. Whereas this movie, it's just it's a fun movie to watch, and really, I think in that respect, a great exemplar of this kind of movie, of the spy thriller type of movie.
Yeah, I really wish that directors used Gina Carano in a more savvy way, because she has been cast in other things. She was in one of the Fast and the Furious movies, which is ridiculous. There's no way that you're not going to make me believe that Michelle Rodriguez could beat up Gina Carano.
Yeah, there's no way that happens.
She was in Deadpool, which was stupid because they all had powers, so why cast her when you're not going to have her fight?
Right. I mean, what she needs to be, I think, if she wants to keep acting, is to be not the sort of main figure as she was in these two, in Haywire and In the Blood, but as one of the characters, kind of like the Channing Tatum character, who's in there for a few fight scenes and who looks right doing it. And that, she could make herself...
Dude, they gotta get her in one of the Netflix Marvel series.
Oh, God, I couldn't agree more, yeah.
She should be in, like, Jessica Jones or something like that.
Right, absolutely.
That would be, I think, a really good fit for her.
Right, or, like, put her in a...
Like Daredevil or something.
Yeah, I could just... The fight scenes in Daredevil are so heavy-duty anyway, like, she would just fit in perfectly, I think.
Right. Oh, man, I really want that now.
Yeah,
I wish
absolutely.
I hadn't brought it up.
Right, yeah, well, it gives you something to wish for in the future.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's about what we have for today. Haywire is available. You should definitely come down to Mentor Public Library or to your local library and check it out. And it's something you should really look forward to enjoying, I think.
All right. Thanks for listening.
All right. Have a good one. No Talking in the Library is a production of Mentor Public Library. Views expressed here are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect those of the library board or the library administration. Our producer is Marilyn Weiss. Our webmaster is Mary Pelton. Our theme music was done by Adriana Krickel. You can find us at our website at www.mentorpl.org/adults/no talking.